Ladies and gentlemen, kicking off the first stop on his world tour, our new president and prophet, Russell M. Nelson! You say you want some revelation, well, here you go. It's gonna blow your freaking mind.
Hey, it's May 15th, 2022, and this is the Mormon News Roundup. I'm your host, D-Vase, and I'm joined by my co-host, Al.
Hey, D-Vase, thanks for having me again for another week of Mormondom news.
This is going to be an absolutely incredible week. You are not going to want to miss a minute of it. We got an action-packed week in Mormonism where we're going to look at how Captain Moroni ended up in federal prison and what the LDS Church is doing to help refugees in Ukraine, and how you, listener, can get your own church-approved, personalized, custom garments. And we're going to end this with a blockbuster report on church finances and much, much more. This is a must-listen episode, Al.
We've got some pretty heavy hitters on this episode. And, the funny thing is, I think most of it comes from earlier on in the week. I didn't see a lot of news from later on in the week, but boy, I think by Tuesday, our list was as long as my arm.
This is going to be absolutely thrilling. I cannot wait. I would like to thank our sponsor, which is Signature Books. You can head over to their website, www.signaturebooks.com. And they have released, to give them, Al and myself, an advanced copy of Romney Burke's new book, which is Romney Burke's new book, which is entitled Susa Young Gates, Daughter of Mormonism. And we're going to be giving you a little bit of snippets on that in the future. We're just going to give you a little bit of a teaser on that. But we're looking forward to reading this advanced copy of the book. And you should, as a listener, you should go out there and check out that book as well. We'll give you a little bit more of that as we get going along. Our first article today is brought to you by Al. And can you take us through the first article?
I certainly will. So we're going to head over across the pond to one of the big hot spots in the world news right now, Ukraine. So Russia's invaded Ukraine. Ukraine's fighting very hard against Russia, and the church newsroom. This one comes from the church's own newsroom for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and this is an article. They just titled it as a news release, so I'm not sure what to title this, or they didn't even tell me who wrote it, but it's from May 9th, 2022, and I'm just going to tell you that they had a chapel in the city of Lviv, which is Ukrainian for Lviv, and so this little chapel in Lviv is where they're staging and supplying people who are looking to evacuate from Ukraine to Poland. And so it's kind of like a last stop where people can rest up, they can gather themselves, regroup a little, and resupply before heading over the border into Poland. And so they've had some members, German members, driving vans, not rented vans, privately owned vehicles, loaded with supplies, all the way across the border from Germany over into Ukraine, where they could drop supplies at this church building. And we've talked in the past a little bit about the church using their buildings for more than just a meeting house on Sundays. And this is a prime example. I mean, the church is basically a refugee shelter, a homeless shelter, a soup kitchen. It's got a kitchen in there, fully stocked, or fully stocked with, some serving utensils and whatnot. But now they're bringing in food and everything that they can cook there in the kitchen. They've got bathrooms. So they've got a baptismal font that they're turning into using for like bathing and showering purposes. They've got the showers in there as well. So, and they've converted all of the classrooms and the offices and the gymnasium into different purposed areas for people to gather. They can spend the night. They can sleep there for 2 or 3 days just to rest up before making that trip across the border. So this is one of the really good articles about the church. I'm really proud of the church for doing this kind of humanitarian work.
Yeah, you bet, Al. And we covered this in one of our previous episodes that the church has donated millions of dollars in the to help combat the refugee crisis in Ukraine. They've got they talked about how the mission president in this article is working with volunteers that are driving long distances to really take care of folks who are in difficult circumstances. And it's not just in Ukraine; it's stakes in Germany, Switzerland, Austria. They've all partnered with smaller branches to meet the specific needs of the refugees traveling out of the Ukraine crisis. In fact, we brought up in one of our previous Mormon News Roundup episodes that the church took a hotel and converted it to a refugee camp and decided to, and to be specific, an NGO was using a hotel to house refugees on their way out of this horrible crisis. And the church said that they were going to pick up the tab for that hotel and that they pledged in excess of $10 million. And Russell, the president of the church, Russell M. Nelson, is saying, quote, "We're doing everything that we can in this." And it really seems like the church is really leading the way and doing a terrific job. So, I find a lot of pride, that they're following the Christ-like charitable. I think Jesus would be proud of what the church is doing in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. This is one of those episodes that, we do, we poke a jab at the church here and there. And even later on this episode, I'm sure we'll poke a few jabs. But we really want to report on all the good, the bad, and the ugly of Mormonism. And this is one of those wonderful times where we get to say, just throw a clap out there, a pat on the back, give an attaboy to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for their efforts on the world stage.
You betcha, Al. And by the way, we have a website. If you have news articles that you want to submit to us and that you think would be interesting for our next episode of Mormon News Roundup, this is our 7th episode. And for episode 8, if you have an article that you want to share with us, then head on over to our website, which is mormonnewsroundup.org. That's with 2 N's, mormonnewsroundup.org. And you can submit an article for next week that we'd be happy to take a look at. And that takes us to our second article, which I find to be very interesting. And it deals with Captain Moroni. By the way, who is Captain Moroni, Al?
Okay, so Captain Moroni, all right, any of our listeners ought to know who this guy is. But I guess I could say his James Wayne Entrican, but I'm going to go a little bit further than that. The actual character Captain Moroni comes straight out of the Book of Mormon, from the Book of Alma, and during the wars between the Lamanites and the Nephites, Captain Moroni was the leader of the Nephite armies. So.
He lived in the 1st century BC, skilled military commander, and kind of one of the chief characters in the Book of Mormon. He also, in the Book of Mormon, was famous for his title of liberty. What was the title of liberty, Al? Do you remember?
Yeah, so the title of liberty was a banner that he'd taken, or he took his cloak and wrote on it in memory of our wives, our children, our freedom, and our religion, and basically just went flying this banner around so that people would rally to him and take up arms to overthrow the king that the wicked Nephites had put in place, or had put in power, and run off the old democratically elected, chief. Is it chief priest?
I think it was the Ammonihah.
Ammonihah, the chief judge. That's what I'm thinking of, chief judge.
I believe it was Ammonihah. So why are we bringing up how is Captain Moroni, who lived in 100 BC, how is he? Oh, I'm sorry, it's Amaleki's. Amaleki's was the chief.
Yeah, Ammonihah, I think, is a town.
Right, yes, it's Amaleki. But how is it that he's making the news since King Moroni lived in 100 BC? How is he making the news in this week?
In 2022?
Yeah.
On May 6th, okay, this one comes from the website Law and Crime, and the title of the article is Man Who Dressed as Captain Moroni from Mormon Sacred Text on January 6th, which January 6, 2021, tells judge he still believes election results were tampered with and gets jail time. This one's from Marissa Sarnoff.
Wait a minute. You're telling me, Al, that Captain Moroni is heading to federal prison?
He's headed to federal prison.
Well,
This poor guy. Okay, so it's not actually.
Joseph Smith never saw this coming. I'm going to go out on a limb here. Joseph Smith never saw this one coming.
When you said Will Smith, I thought, well, I guess Will Smith got smacked on the face on this one, didn't he?
No, I meant Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith. He didn't anticipate Captain Moroni going to federal prison.
Could you imagine if Joseph Smith could see and read about this story today? Oh, my goodness. So, yeah, the name of this gentleman from Arizona is James Wayne Entrican. He's 49 years old. A little bit, shall we say, stocky in build. And he dressed up in what people described as being Roman gladiator armor. And but this is, it's not his fault. Anybody that's seen the very popular painting of Captain Moroni sees that he's wearing this style of Roman armor, standing there holding the title of liberty waving in the wind behind him. So, I mean, this guy, he dressed up like Captain Moroni the best that he had been taught. So,
and he stormed the Capitol on January 6th as part of the insurrection to overthrow the government.
Yeah, made national news, and then goes and tells the judge during his thing that he was wrong. He felt like he knew that as soon as they went inside the Capitol that he had done the wrong thing and went too far. So he owned up to his fault or his guilt there, and that's what got him thrown in. Well, is that what got him thrown in prison? What happened is
it ends up that he didn't get convicted of a felony, Al. It was only a misdemeanor.
Yeah, it was a misdemeanor. So it's
some of these other Capitol rioters, though, they've received a lot more time than he did. Some of them have gotten 9 months in prison, so he only got 45 days. And I think some of the reason behind that is he wasn't beating anyone, he didn't assault anyone, he didn't destroy anything. He just trespassed in the building, and that's what his misdemeanor. He was guilty of a trespass. So he was, obviously anyone who participated in that should be condemned. That was an outrage to our Constitution and to our government. But he seemed to have gotten a shorter sentence than most people.
He did, and I think it's because he owned up to his guilt, that he knows he took it too far. He made national headlines by being quoted for saying that the election was stolen, that Biden was never supposed to be president. And, I guess big Trump supporter, he really wanted his candidate to win, which he didn't. Now, the ironic thing that I find about all this, Dives, is you've got this guy from Arizona who is trying to overthrow a democratically run election by referencing a Book of Mormon character who was trying to overthrow a non-democratically appointed king.
Good point.
And reinstate a democratically appointed president or chief judge.
So you're saying he basically had it backwards?
Yeah, it is a little backwards, but he's not the first person. He's not the first person to do this. I mean, our own senator in Utah, Mike Lee, he referred to President Trump as Captain Moroni.
That is correct. Yes, he compared President Mike Lee, who's also a Latter-day Saint, very active. Mm-hmm. He says that Donald Trump. He compared Donald Trump to Captain Moroni. He said, "quote To my Mormon friends, my Latter-day Saint friends, think of Donald Trump as Captain Moroni." End quote. Now, Al, when I think of Donald Trump, about the last thing that comes to mind is Captain Moroni. I don't see it.
No, Donald Trump is maybe a bit of a rabble rouser, but I don't see him as being a great general or a skilled leader. I certainly don't see him as a well-disciplined person.
Well, listen, also, I'm a veteran of the armed forces. Remember, Donald Trump got 5 exemptions for the Vietnam War.
Yep.
And there's been a significant amount of research into those exemptions, including the doctor who gave him his exemptions for Vietnam, who said that he had bone spurs. You might remember that. I don't seem to remember Captain Moroni getting exemptions from any battles or bone spurs. And by the way, that doctor, a lot of people have said that he was paid to give those exemptions and that Donald Trump really never had bone spurs. So it's really kind of to put those two in the same sentence. I mean, I don't see how I can't find two people who are more further apart than Captain Moroni and Donald Trump to begin with.
Well, for real. I mean, when it comes to bone spurs, I know that like on the heel of everybody's foot, like the heel bone, there is a spur that pushes forward. And a lot of times people get plantar fasciitis from that spur digging into the tendon that runs along the bottom of your foot. Very painful thing. But some spurs are just natural. So I don't doubt that, Donald Trump has a bone spur on his heel bone, just like everybody else.
Maybe that's why he had such difficulty walking down ramps when he was at West Point. If you remember him going down that ramp.
I do. It was a little funny.
Last thing on Captain Moroni, what this really brings up also is that for Latter-day Saints, Captain Moroni is kind of like a dog whistle out there that says that the government is tyrannical and whatever we want is correct. You remember Cliven Bundy, the anti-government activist, who is also a member of the LDS Church. Well, he made references to Captain Moroni in his standoff in Nevada back in 2014. And Bundy used banners quoting Moroni as well. His the famous quote from Captain Moroni, quote, "In memory of our God, our religion, and freedom and peace, our wives and our children." So even these really these really weird Latter-day Saints are quoting him. And also Ammon Bundy, the son of Cliven, who had that standoff at the National Wildlife Refuge in, what was that, Oregon?
Yeah, it was up in Oregon. It's very much like a backwoods. You could say it's a national park, but it's out there in the middle of nowhere. I think as far as national parks go, it might have been like a picnic bench next to a porta potty or an outhouse or something.
Yeah, so Ammon Bundy called himself Captain Moroni. So Captain Moroni is being used by these really outlandish and, quite frankly, criminal Mormons in a odd way to justify insurrectionist and illegal activities. Do I have that about right?
Absolutely right. And what's really upsetting about that is we'll see a little bit of that in a later article when we get into talking about episode 4 of Under the Banner of Heaven. But you'll see it's kind of dangerous when you have really staunch believing Latter-day Saints that decide to take some sort of Book of Mormon reference as an excuse to break the laws of the land.
That's well said. And if our listeners have made it this far, would you head on over to Twitter and let us know what your thoughts are on this Arizona Captain Moroni going to federal prison? Do you think that he got the correct sentence? Do you think that he should have gotten more time? Should he have gotten less time? Let us know on Twitter, and we're at News Mormon on Twitter. And that brings us to our next article, which was published. This is article number. This is article number. Our third article.
Yep, our third article.
Third article, which was published on Reddit 4 days ago on May 9th, 2022. And we're not going to take too much time on this one, but this is a funny thread that somebody, the Washington, D.C. temple is reopening. And by the way, I have my tour lined up on June 3rd to go through the Washington, D.C. temple, Al, for the public tour. So I'm locked in.
Do you? Good for you. Chance of a lifetime.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it every minute. We're going with my entire family, including extended family. It should be a great time. And this article, which is a real tongue-in-cheek article, somebody was in Trader Joe's. And by the way, this is in the Reddit, the Latter-day Saint subreddit on Reddit, which is the faithful Reddit version, by the way. And the title of the article is "Some Interesting Beer I Spotted at Trader Joe's in Washington, D.C. this weekend." Can you describe what's in that picture, Al?
Yeah, that is a picture of a beer bottle that says "Surrender Dorothy Ale."
And it's got a picture of the temple on there. And it's also got somebody it's got like a construction worker who's trying to paint over the overpass
Mm-hmm.
that people are always putting on this overpass on I-495. They're always putting "Surrender Dorothy" on this overpass, and they keep having to paint over it, and people keep putting it back on there. It's like a running joke.
Mm-hmm.
So this comes from Seven Locks Brewing in Rockville, Maryland. And, I'd love to go and sample it, but I'm going to tell you, Al, I'm a teetotaler, and I wouldn't be able to tell you if it was good ale or not, to be honest with you. So I'm probably the wrong one to buy some and give you an opinion.
Yeah, I'll bet it tastes like beer.
Well, it gives an entirely new definition to pale ale. That's the oldest joke in the book. That's the oldest joke in the book, but I guess I'll use it here anyway. But I'm looking forward to touring the DC Temple, and the temple is a never-ending source of pop culture and references around here. It's a big deal,
and I see that becoming a bigger deal going forward into the future. Especially with the way the temple gets referenced over and over again in different parts of pop culture.
Yeah, definitely. And by the way, if you want to get to know more of your humble hosts here, Al and myself, D-Vase, head on over to patreon.com/Mormon News Roundup. And you can unlock a few episodes that gives a little bit more of our backstory if you're interested in what our motivations are for making this podcast. Now, our next article here, which is very timely, is from LDSdaily.com. I'm a big fan of LDSdaily.com. They've got some very interesting stuff on there. This was published on May 2nd, 2022, and it says, Church discontinues military sacred garments and offers garment marking services. So I'm a member of the reserves. I still am a member. It looks like I'm going to be retiring probably sometime in the next year after 22 years of service. But I am a member of the armed forces, just in a reserve capacity for most of my career. And
we still want to thank you for your service anyway, D-Vase.
Well, I consider myself kind of like a Captain Moroni. I know that comes as a shock to you, Al. But okay, maybe not. Maybe not. So in a letter sent to local leaders, the Material Management Department of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints announces that, guess what? Military members and their garments, the garments previously designated for military members, have been discontinued and will no longer be produced. Now, the church used to have specially made garments for military members that were either camouflage or brown or olive colored that would, kind of go with a uniform, because, if you're going into harm's way, you don't want stark white underwear. It's just not appropriate, and it doesn't fit in. So they used to have military specific ones. Well, guess what? In the letter sent to local leaders, they're not doing that anymore. Well, so what are they doing instead? And this is what is very interesting in the letter sent very recently here. It says that when possible, endowed members of the military service should wear their garments the same as other members, but that sometimes people need specific uniform requirements that have different colors, different styles associated with the undergarments. So there's a new garment making order form that members of the military can send into the church, and it's for tops only, but essentially you can have your own custom-made markings put on on your garments now. And that can include different colors than have ever been done before. So let's say you're part of a police outfit in Arizona, and they have purple undershirts or blue undershirts or whatever it is. Well, you can send in those government-issued undershirts and have them marked, and then they become Latter-day Saint garments. So essentially, the church is now offering the ability to make custom-made garments.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a big change.
Yeah, it sure is. It used to be that the church used to tightly control these things, and you had to get them from the distribution very specifically. Well, now you can do it on their own. In fact, some of these undershirts, let's say that you're from an FBI or a CIA, it might say FBI on the front or CIA on the back. And guess what? The church says that's fine. We'll still make them into garments, and we'll still put the markings on there, just so long as the whatever symbols or insignias on there are in harmony with the sacred nature of the garments and shouldn't have things like weapons, skulls, crossbones. But if it says FBI, CIA, highway patrol, Army or Navy or whatever it is on your undershirt, that's no problem. So it's really a unique thing that the church has never done before.
No, in fact, the church, I guess, when the garment first came out, was very opposite of this. The garment used to be basically just a pair of long underwear that they would have, the wife or the mother or some seamstress go and put some stitches in and put the markings in at home. So
Oh, is
it
that
was
right?
that, yeah, back in the early days when the original garment first came out, it wasn't something that was mass produced, and it wasn't until sometime in the early 1900s that the church started manufacturing the garments and requiring the members to stop making their own garments at home and start buying them from the church's distribution centers.
Huh. Wasn't aware of that. Yeah, I
So,
knew
so
they used to be one piece, and then they
yeah,
eventually went to two piece.
yeah. And so it's just, for me, it's curious to watch the history and the evolution of the garment over time.
Yeah, so what this special form says is that you can actually ship your, let's say that you want to buy some shirts off of Amazon. You can literally send
Hmm.
your purchase item from an online vendor directly to Beehive Clothing, having filled out the order form, send it to them, and they will ship it back to you with the proper markings on there.
Wow.
Yeah. So I just find I know maybe a lot of our listeners don't find that to be very interesting, but since I am a member of the military, I noticed that they don't offer that anymore, and that led to some questions. So I found that to be very interesting.
Well, like I said, I find it very interesting just understanding the whole progression of the garment from the time of Joseph Smith to present day. Present day, the most current alteration being that Beehive Clothing's wanting you to send your own or your own clothes in to have the garment markings stitched in there.
Hmm. Very interesting. And by the way, if our listeners are still listening, would you drop us a like on iTunes and rate us and leave a comment, or on Spotify, wherever you find this particular podcast? Please leave us a like and drop us a comment. That would really help us out a lot. Now we're
Yeah.
going to move into our next couple of articles, and they are on the silver screen and cinema in particular.
Mhm.
Can you walk us through this next movie that is going to be shot out?
Yeah, I'm a bit of a movie buff if our listeners out there haven't figured that out, so I'm going to head up both of these. The first article is coming from Variety, published May 9th, 2022. Freddie Highmore, who people would recognize Freddie Highmore, he was a child actor that became very successful, and has made that bridge over into adult-themed acting. He's now doing The Good Doctor. He's let's see. He started off as the kid from August Rush and Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the remake with. He played opposite Johnny Depp. He played Charlie. So that he was also in Finding Neverland. Freddie Highmore, excellent British actor that's done very well and had a very successful career. Now is going to play alongside Maisie Williams, and they're uniting for the Manacled Mormon Case adaptation called Sinner versus Saints. And this article is written by Manori Ravindran, and it takes place in the 1970s. There was I was discussing this with Dives earlier, that I knew that I'd seen a documentary about this, and I found that documentary. It's Kirk and yeah, let's see, not Kirk Anderson. Errol Morris made this documentary in 2010. The documentary is titled Tabloid, and so it takes place in 1970s Los Angeles and London, where a beauty queen falls in love with a young man who becomes a Mormon missionary. And the beauty queen, her name is Joyce McKinney. This is all based on a true story. She becomes obsessed with Kirk Anderson and follows him from Los Angeles to London, ends up kidnapping him, holding him hostage, and forcing him to be her sexual slave over the course of days. I don't know if it's weeks, but probably about a week. And nobody knows where he went. His mission companion just knows that he disappeared. He doesn't know where he is, and so they go on like this countrywide manhunt in the UK to find him, and end up she ends up turning herself in, as I recall, and they put her on trial, and she's like, "Well, we're in love," but she couldn't bear to be apart from this young Mormon missionary. Uh, it's a wild ride.
Ow! I'm having a. Okay. Thanks. I want to say thanks for letting us know, but now I'm kind of regretting that you did. Um,
This is
because, I mean,
yeah.
we have I'm dumbfounded on this one. I mean, this is a Mormon rape comedy movie.
Yeah. So the whole thing plays out very, very strange. Okay.
I mean, there's nothing more funny than Mormon rape, right? I mean, is that just I mean,
well,
come on.
In a slightly post Me Too era, yeah, it's a little strange to hear that.
Yeah, we are in the Me Too era where Hollywood's not supposed to be doing these kind of things anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how is it that that it's okay to have a comedy about a missionary who's getting sexually assaulted and raped and kidnapped and abducted, and instead of making that into something that's horrible and despicable and something to be avoided, instead it's turned into a ha-ha comedy that is going to be lots of laughs with zany twists and turns.
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's a very bizarre story. I mean, now, granted, this is the 1970s, and the era of free love is flowing wildly, but that's not what this story is about. You're right. This story, we're taking a bit of a turn for the serious now. This is about rape. This is non-consensual
It's
sex.
not free love if the other person's not consensual. I'm all for free love. Let's bring it on. Why not? This is not consensual. So, you know, I thought a lot about this. This is going to be shooting, I guess, in production starting next year. And, you know, I thought, how is it that Hollywood in the post-Me Too era can even conceive of having a comedy that is about a Mormon rape? And I think it really comes back to the Mormon missionary stereotype. Mormon missionaries, they're weird. They're robots. They don't have feelings. They're not even. I don't even think Hollywood really considers them to be real people with emotions and feelings. You know, they're just disposable. So his particular suffering in this horrible situation, well, that's just cannon fodder. And as long as it brings in ratings, then let's laugh it up. Am I taking this too far?
I'm not sure if you're taking it too far or not. What I'm going to say to give a counter point of view on this is that this isn't necessarily something that that Hollywood or that the outside world has foisted upon the image of the Mormon missionary, but the Mormon missionaries they've been told for so long, especially for across so many decades of missionary work and going out. I mean, they are a very recognizable character out on the streets. Okay, no matter where you live, you see young men wearing backpacks, a white shirt, a tie, dark slacks, clean cut, fresh shaved, and waving and smiling at everybody. And these are the same guys that will sooner or later inevitably knock on everybody's door, and then people will either hide and pretend they're not home, or they'll open up the door and talk to them, and or if they slam the door in these guys' face, these guys just keep coming. They just keep going. They just leave that house, move on to the next one, and so on down the street. And so they've kind of created this kind of robotic or non-individualistic persona themselves. And I think that Hollywood's just capitalizing upon that, as they do with everything. I mean, it's kind of like Catholic nuns have a reputation for being stern teachers that slap kids' knuckles with rulers and stuff. Well, that stereotype didn't come from nothing. It's because a lot of people that are working in Hollywood now went to Catholic school and got their knuckles rapped.
I guess so. I'm reading this from Wikipedia, and it says American Mormon missionary Kirk Anderson in England in 1977, because McKinney and her accomplice skipped bail and fled the United States before the case could be tried and were not extradited. They were never tried for the specific crimes. According to Anderson, he had been abducted by McKinney from the steps of a church meeting house, chained to a bed, and raped by her. How is this the setting of a comedy, especially in our modern day age where we're supposed to be post Me Too? Something is really wrong with Hollywood. Honestly, the degeneracy of mainstream entertainment, especially Hollywood, truly knows no bounds.
Yeah, where we're still able to. I'm curious to watch the movie now to see what angle they try to play it from. But really, the way that the original story went, it was rather bizarre. I mean, and what was so bizarre about it is this wasn't some, frumpy frat girl trying to, get laid. This was a beauty queen. I mean, the girl was gorgeous.
Right.
And she was all over him, and he was just, no, I've got to guard my virtue. And she broke him down by force.
Which is what a missionary, I guess, is supposed to be doing. He was doing everything that he was supposed to do. So I just find this to be in pretty poor taste. To our listeners out there, we're interested in knowing: do you think that this is going to be a good movie? Is this a proper subject, or is D-Vase just a big time prude? Let us know. Go over to Facebook.com/Mormon News Roundup. Let us know your thoughts on it. And while we're going to stay on Hollywood for our next article, which is the Under the Banner of Heaven. The new episode of Under the Banner of Heaven just got released, episode 4.
Yeah, episode 4 came out this last week, and I watched it. And let me tell you, at this point in the series, you're either going to you aren't going to get this far, or you're going to watch all the way through episode 7. I myself, I think I'm going to watch through episode 7, but anybody that doesn't watch all the way through, I don't blame you, because I think it's pretty dang clear at this point what the agenda is, okay? But this article, so the church has never formally come out itself and given a statement about Under the Banner of Heaven. It's done that with other shows about the church. But
they haven't come out with a statement about the TV show. They did come out with a statement about the book.
That's right. They did. Yeah, they did come out with a statement about the book. So there's been a response there, but not about the TV series. And until now. And the reason I say until now is because this comes straight from the Deseret News, which is the church's mouthpiece in the press. Okay.
Right.
So May 11th, 2022, Katie McKellar is the one that wrote this exclusive. The real Brenda Lafferty is lost in Under the Banner of Heaven series, her sister says. Her sister, her name is Sharon Weeks, is no longer active in the LDS Church, but she may be just a disaffected or inactive, but she's not. She's definitely not anti-LDS. She's not against the church. And so for her to go and give this interview, I thought was really, there's a lot there with her just giving the interview to the church. I know that there's a lot of inactive people that no longer attend church, and that they have kind of just gone off and done their own thing or stopped attending for whatever reasons. But they still in their core believe that church is true, and so they just have tried to leave the church alone. And that seems to be where she's coming from with this. But the article, she expresses that she feels like her sister's memories of, the memory of not just her sister, but her niece, because there was a baby brutally murdered in this story as well. And our podcast is really taking a turn for the serious after that last one. So Sharon Weeks, the sister of Brenda Lafferty, the victim and her baby, who was also a victim of these murders, she feels like the memories were overshadowed with blood and gore. And that's one of the quotes that she gives from the article. And I thought that,
She says basically that the series is absolute fiction.
yeah. And she says she feels like watching this, that she feels like she was watching her sister get murdered all over again.
And that's an important point here, Al, because this isn't, and it's not just saying that Under the Banner of Heaven has the wrong spin, or they didn't get the costumes right, or they maybe got the dialogue wrong, or they didn't exactly show the differentiation between regular members and fundamentalist members or excommunicated members. Those are all really quibbles. I mean, we're talking about real people who were killed. And when you don't get those details right, it has a real impact to the family members who remember Brenda and that small child as well. And it affects them in really profound ways.
Yeah, that's something that is a story that deserves to be told in and of itself. Okay, so with regards to who the real Brenda Lafferty was, her sister has a lot of great things to say regarding the life of this very vivacious and vibrant young woman who was cut down brutally in her prime. And, there's things that, the whole scene where she's at BYU getting locked into a studio alone with a producer who's trying to make advances on her. She says, well, that never happened.
Right. And also in the temple, the wedding scene, which is one of the biggest scenes so far in the series, Dustin Lance Black, which is the show producer, makes it seem like Brenda was very scared, and he depicted it as very creepy. Yeah. But Ms. Weeks in the article said that Brenda actually thought that it was a beautiful personal experience, and she loved every bit of it. She didn't think it was weird. She didn't think it was creepy. So...
No, it's. I think what we have here is Mr. Black is trying to spread the peanut butter as thin and as far as he can on this sandwich. I think that he's trying to make as much hay as possible with the Under the Banner of Heaven series. And so the problem is that has he forgotten that this is a real story, real people, that's a real tragedy. And every time he tries to throw an extra story in to say, well, maybe it's not Brenda's story, but it's somebody's story. And, that there's something to be said for that. Okay, that's a legitimate argument that I'm sure that there are plenty of young, aspiring journalists who have been trying to make their way as a woman in a man's world that have been approached in a very uncomfortable situation, just like her. But Brenda's not that person, okay? And so I don't think that this movie is the place to spread that message.
I agree with you, Al. If you want to make a message about that, then don't make it based off of a true story, like Big Love. That wasn't based off of anyone whatsoever.
That's a great example. Big Love is a great example. There's a story that every story in there may be somebody's story. It might not. Yeah, certainly not Bill Paxton's story. Not the story of most people. But at the same time, I'm sure that there's been plenty of people out there who have been marginalized or sidelined in some way. And yet, this is just not, this isn't a place to make that kind of a statement or that kind of to make that kind of a drive home that, it's because of fundamentalism or polygamy or, Mountain Meadows and violence. And, but at the same time, I'm not sure that Sharon Weeks really understands her sister's in-laws. I don't know that she says some things in there that it was about this. It was a crime of passion. It wasn't organized and sinister and from fundamental religious beliefs. I don't know if she's qualified to make that kind of statement.
Yeah, maybe not. And I agree with what you said about that this is a story of someone. It's really not the story of Brenda Lafferty, according to Ms. Weeks. And
Hmm.
it's not harmless to make these little mistakes. You know,
No.
we're
Hmm.
talking about real people, real lives, real people were killed. And when you
Hmm.
take someone's cherished memory and you really, all I can say is, Al, that you really desecrate it, it's not a harmless act to do something like that.
No, it's not.
And so that's where I have a real problem, not just with church history and accuracy and oh, they didn't get the costume exactly right and oh, they said something slightly off. Okay, these are all quibbles. I'm getting
Hmm.
down to the core of the series. I
Hmm.
just have a fundamental problem with it. So,
Yeah.
to our listeners out there, if you, we're very interested in your feedback on there. Head over to our YouTube channel and let us know. We upload all these podcasts to YouTube after we're done. Head over to YouTube, drop us a comment down there. Let us know what your thoughts are on episode of Under the Banner of Heaven, and we'll be happy to respond. Is there anything else on this article that you want to bring up, Al?
No, I think we pretty well covered it. That this is, it's just the more that this story or this series is playing out, it's just kind of coming across that Mr. Black has an axe to grind, and I hope that I hope that in the future we'll start to see better movies. I am very pleased with the way some of the scenes in the series are being played out, but. Yeah, I think like I said, he's just trying to reach too far with this one series, and I don't think he should be reaching that far.
Yeah, remember Dustin Lance Black was raised LDS, and
Yeah,
also Al, he is gay. He's married. He's one of the most.
yeah,
He's married to. He's a very high profile gay
uh,
marriage in
yeah,
Hollywood.
an Olympian or some athlete.
Yeah, they're a
He's
very
married to.
high
Yeah,
profile couple,
yeah.
and you know, maybe I'm psychoanalyzing here. Maybe I'm going a little too far, but with people who get disaffected with the church, it
Mhm.
seems like people who grew up realize that they're LGBTQ. When those people become disaffected, I would say that it's not just a normal type of "Hey, I'm going to leave the religion." They usually leave with um, that they're usually pretty upset when they leave because
Yeah.
the church's messaging to them really it kind of the church's messaging to the LGBTQ community, they
Hmm.
really see that as a personal affront to them. So it seems like he's trying to get even. I know I'm psychoanalyzing here,
Hmm.
but I don't know.
Yeah. I'd have to agree with you. But even so, I'm still enjoying the series, and I am going to watch it to episode 7. As far as our listeners go, well, you decide for yourselves how far you want to watch. Give the you'll probably know within the first 10 minutes of the first episode whether or not this is for you or not. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I just want to read one last tweet that someone sent out about the Under the Banner of Heaven. If you go onto Twitter, I mean, there's a lot of talking about this. Is a big news. Somebody said a friend sent me a temple scene from Under the Banner of Heaven, and honestly, though I haven't been to the temple in years, that felt so disgusting. Would a TV show reenact a religion's sacred rituals if that religion wasn't constantly othered and rendered strange in the media? These are just interesting questions that Dustin Lance Black has brought up for us, and if to our listeners out there, we want to hear your feedback on that as well. Now we have two
Mhm.
last articles here,
Yeah.
and our last article. You want to stay tuned for this last article. Our last
Yes,
article,
you do.
but this one is also good because in recently, just a couple of days ago, the Supreme Court had an unprecedented leak in the Roe versus Wade. Al, I know you follow the news pretty well. What happened with that leak?
Okay, so with the leak, it came out that the Supreme Court was going to overturn Roe versus Wade, and nobody really knows where the leak came from. But boy, did it stir the pot! And this has gone it's gone bananas, is what it's done. It's
Yeah,
it's all over the
unprecedented.
place.
Yes, it
Yeah.
has, and that brings us to this article, which is related to that because Mormons have not escaped the fray. And by the way, who is most responsible for this potential leak? And I have one person in mind because the person that I think is most directly responsible for the potential of overthrowing the longstanding Roe versus Wade and the paving the way towards the legalization of abortion in the United States is your dearly departed Senator, Orrin Hatch.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
And that's because Orrin Hatch, remember, he was the chair of the judicial committee in the Senate.
Yeah, that's right. He was.
So he is the one who would have held the Merrick Garland. You remember when President Obama was trying to appoint the Supreme Court justice to fill, was that, gee whiz, who was that? That was the really right-wing guy. Who was that guy? Anyway,
for heaven's sakes.
Scalia.
Antonin Scalia.
Yeah. So Merrick Garland never got a hearing from the Judicial Committee, and Merrick Garland would have been far more left-leaning than the justices that we have now. And also, you can thank Orrin Hatch for pushing through Kavanaugh and also Amy Coney Barrett, who is also part of this decision. So if it hadn't been for Orrin Hatch holding out, pushing people through, and doing what he did to reshape the court, Roe versus Wade we wouldn't be looking at the overturning like we have now. And that brings us to the article that we have, which is May 10th, 2022 by Amy Ellie. And the title of the article from the today.com is Mormon Mom of 6 responds to her viral stance on how to end abortions. So in the article, we have the Latter-day Saint Gabrielle Blair. She says her biggest worry when putting her arguments online was that no one would read it, but that's not the case. There's been 36 million retweets of Gabrielle's original thread, which she put it out in 2018. She didn't think that anyone would read it. In fact, she's behind the blog Design Mom and is an active member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And this thread was in the original thread was in the weeks leading up to Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation. So, and that was around the conversation that was sparked even back in 2018 about Roe versus Wade reversals. So it's an incredible thread here. And it says that men are 100% responsible for unwanted pregnancies. That it's not 50-50, it's not 75-25, that it's all men who are responsible for unwanted pregnancies. Okay. And she describes that women's birth control, including the actual steps to getting prescriptions, that it says, her article says, quote, birth control options for women require a doctor's appointment, a prescription, it's not free and often not cheap, end quote. And that there's many complications and side effects that go along with women's birth control that are really challenging, and that men are, she says, quote, men are willing to risk life and health and well-being of women because they don't use proper birth control. And she says, quote, if you're not holding men responsible for unwanted pregnancies, then you are wasting your time, end quote. So I read through her entire thread here, Al, and you're not going to believe what her end conclusion is to really solve the problem.
I can't even imagine what this would be.
Al, you are not going to believe this. When you get to the end of her full conversation on Twitter, which again is very popular, it's going viral these days, and it's had, like I said, 36 million impressions, 140,000 retweets, and over 300,000 likes. So when you want to talk about Roe versus Wade and Mormons, Latter-day Saints, and abortion, Gabrielle Blair, she's on the very top. She's at the tip of the top. And her end conclusion for how to solve this problem is male castration.
Like physical castration.
That is correct.
And okay, well, I guess if men are 100% responsible for pregnancy,
yes,
then that would certainly take care of the problems of pregnancies or unwanted pregnancies.
That's right. She says, stop protesting at clinics, stop shaming women, stop trying to overturn abortion laws. If you actually care about reducing or eliminating the number of abortions in our country, do one thing only: simply hold men responsible for their actions. And so she said, what would that look like? What would be the immediate consequence for men who cause an unwanted pregnancy? So, in other words, if a man causes an unwanted pregnancy, in my experience, men really like their testicles. This is from her tweet. Does castration seem like a cruel and unusual punishment? Definitely. But that's what she says, put a castration law on the books.
Wow. That's a bold statement to make.
Yeah, it is. This is, like I said, this is making the news. So when people are Googling more Roe versus Wade or Latter-day Saints, this is what's coming up.
Well, then where are we going to get our obedient workers from in the next generation?
What do you mean, Al? What do you mean?
I guess I'm causing more problems than I'm worth. So, well, if you're going to, I mean, it's not just unwanted pregnancies that are going to be prevented by castrating all the men. It's going to be any wanted pregnancies as well. Although I guess, using the same logic that brought polygamy around, one man can impregnate several women. So all it takes is one man, although then you end up with some severe genetic problems with the lack of diversity in the genome.
Yeah, so in one of her tweets, she says, quote, "Don't like my ideas? That's fine. I'm sure there are better ones. Go ahead and suggest your own ideas. My point is that it's nonsense to focus on women if you're trying to get rid of abortions."
Well, do we have to go so extreme as castration? I'll ride with her this far. Mandatory vasectomies.
Yeah. So, and I was with her for a lot of the way too. So I just, maybe I'm just not as much of a feminist as I should be. Maybe I'm just too patriarchal.
Just don't cut off my junk. Go.
It's just, but there's got to be a line here that, there's got to be a better solution than the one that she's posing. I don't have the answer.
Well, what she's proposing is genital mutilation, and that's a step in the wrong direction. Because I mean, it seems like the world's movement right now is trying to stop genital mutilation. Especially like female genital mutilation, but I know that there's a big movement to stop circumcisions as well for the same reason. And this is just going a lot further than just snipping the foreskin. This is going into causing. This is permanent change. That's a permanent solution.
Yeah, so I'm a little bit uncomfortable with her overall conclusions, but she is very newsworthy, and probably not heard the last of her. So, it seems like there should be a better solution. I don't have the solution, but the purpose of this podcast is not for me to espouse what all the right answers are to all of life's questions, but.
But you know what's really exciting to me about this D-Vase is because what's exciting about it is that this is the kind of discussion that we need to start having. We need to start, throw any harebrained idea out there. She says it so herself. You got a better idea? Throw it in the ring. Shoot, what about mandatory vasectomies? Vasectomies are pretty much risk-free and reversible. So, I mean, you can elect to have it reversed when you're ready to be a father.
Maybe you're right. I don't know. All of this, Al, I wanted to try to get a female co-host on for this week, and I did invite a couple of people because probably we are not the best ones to probably come up with the solutions for this.
Heck no.
I'm not putting words in your mouth if I'm saying that.
Oh, no, I'm agreeing with you. Heck no, we are not the right people to have this.
All right. So quick, we're almost down to our last article. I just wanted to follow up real quick from last week. First of all, we do have our confirmed first guest host, and that's from Signature Books. Mr. Devery S. Anderson has agreed to come on the podcast, Al. And remember, we're sponsored by Signature Books, and he's a famous author. And he's agreed. His most famous work is on Emmett Till, but he has agreed to come on the podcast either next week or the week afterwards, or sometime in the near future. He's going to come on with us and ruminate about the Great and Spacious Beehive. So we're definitely looking forward to that.
Certainly are.
And follow-ups from last week. Finally, I have one last follow-up from last week. We talked about who the most powerful ex-Mormons were in the world. Mm-hmm. And we said maybe it was Dustin Lance Black, but I actually have continued to think about that. And remember Bruce Bastian, the inventor of WordPerfect?
Oh, yeah.
Right. He's a Latter-day Saint, and he's worth a lot of money, and he's funded quite a bit of, he's funded. He was part of the Proposition 8 funding. Money talks when it comes to power and influence, and Bruce Bastian's worth over $1 billion.
Yeah.
So, maybe he's the most powerful ex-Mormon in the world, or the most recent one was Jeff Green. He tendered his resignation. He was a Latter-day Saint, and only 6 months ago he was had his membership withdrawn. He's worth $1 billion, and he's also donated to a lot of Mormon-related. He set up an endowment basically for BYU students who are LGBTQ so that they'd be able to leave BYU, and he would house them and help them and do whatever else. So there are a lot of powerful ex-Mormons out there in the world, maybe even more powerful than Dustin Lance Black. I'm not sure.
Mr. Green sounds like a really nice guy. That's very generous of him to look after his fellow men like that.
Yeah, he set up, I think, I wanted to say it was a huge fund. It was something like a $600 million endowment for BYU students who are LGBTQ who need to leave BYU, attend a different school, have different housing, and he really wants to take care of them. So maybe those two are among the most powerful. Really not sure. But anyway.
You see, people can be part of the solution. We don't just have to throw out some extreme ideas to fix things. We can be legitimate in our solutions.
Absolutely. Now, our last article, hopefully our listeners are still with us, because this last article is a doozy. This is incredible. So we have from, if you look at our last article, this is from Twitter here. So I'm pulling up the article right now. It's the tweet from, what's the name of this organization again? The Widow's Might?
Yes.
The Widow's Might Report. So this is a link that was tweeted out on May 10th, 2022 at 10:09 a.m. And if you go to the Widow's Might report at WordPress.com, you're going to see the most detailed review of church finances that is in depth that you're ever going to see. And we're going to walk through some of that with our listeners here today. So the slide number 1 talks about, it's a closer look at the LDS Church's real estate holdings. And some estimates of church property holdings are reaching in excess of $250 billion. Now, the Truth and Transparency Organization said that they could confirm about $20 billion of real estate holdings. But the Widow's Might report does even more. There's a huge volume of information, and this is a giant analysis that really takes in a lot of different sources. So if you go to slide number 2, you're going to see, sorry, my computer is being a little bit slow here. Slide number 2. Are you with me on the second slide?
Yep, I'm with you.
Okay, wonderful. So, the second slide shows basically an overview and a snapshot of how much the church is worth as a whole. So the church does not disclose all of its real estate holdings. And we know that the church owns tens of thousands of dollars of properties, and they're recorded under many unique names. So what this analysis shows is that they think that the church, the Widow's Might report thinks that the church has real estate assets of around $105 billion. And with that total, with Ensign Peak and everything else, including welfare farms, are saying that the church is worth around $255 billion. So Ensign Peak, Ensign Peak, you're looking at about 150 billion, and real estate holdings around 100 billion, and then a little bit extra here and there.
That's incredible, because these guys have been as accurate as they could possibly be. And yet they still seem like they're being conservative in their estimates. But this is as close as they can get, really.
I really think this is as close as anyone can possibly get who does not work at church headquarters or has not had leaked documents. Because remember, Mr. Nielsen from Ensign Peak, he didn't have access to everything.
No.
He doesn't see, he can only see what is inside Ensign Peak. So the church really silos their different, the real estate people don't know what's in the Ensign Peak. Ensign Peak doesn't know what's in other places. The tithing collection, they don't know what's in the other things. They really silo the information. It makes it hard for one person to know how much the church has.
Yeah.
Okay, so going on to the third slide, it shows all the different types of church properties. The church real estate holdings have unique identity names. And some of them, one of them is called the BYU Museum of Art. Another one is the Corporation of the Church of Jesus Christ. Another one is the Kaysville First Corporation of the LDS Church. Another one is the Spanish Fork Third Corporation of the Church of Jesus Christ. There's over 1,500 different names, recorded names for church property across many different, it's really vast in the way that they make it hard for anyone to go out there and search and find all of their real estate. You really have to know what you're looking for in order to capture the full picture.
Yeah, this list looks like it's maybe about 60 to 75 names long, and it's got all these different entities. And they're saying that there's more than 1,200 other variations that they've found out there as well. So this is, wow, this is really something.
Yeah, they're really building on the back of that truth and transparency leak that we covered. I think it was back in episode 2. Yeah. So there's like $20 billion worth of real estate that's just under a couple of names. But if you want the complete picture, you have to know all of the names that the church has. And according to this, the Widow's Mite has found at least 1,300 of those sources, and there may even be more.
Yeah.
So going on to the slide number 4, it says, okay, these are the different categories of real estate holdings. There's ecclesiastical buildings and sites. That's like chapels, temples. And they're saying that that's worth about $62 billion. BYU, that's got 4 campuses. What are the 4 campuses of BYU, Al?
Let's see. They've got the Provo one, which is the main. And then it used to be Rick's College. Now it's BYU Idaho up in Rexburg. And then in Laie, Hawaii, they've got next to the Polynesian Cultural Center there, the BYU Hawaii. Let's see. In the 4th,
LDS Business College.
LDS Business College. Okay,
that's right. It's a small campus. It's up in Salt Lake City. All of that combined is worth about $10 billion. Now there's known farms and ranches that's worth about $9 billion. That's the church welfare farms and investment ranches. And then there's commercial real estate buildings, those identifiable properties in industrial areas, parking lots. That's about $6 billion. All of the mission homes, which we covered earlier, and all of the MTC sites. That's worth about $2 billion. And then finally, we have other property investments. Now, remember, Ensign Peak is worth about $150 billion. The church has admitted that it's worth 50, but the leak says it's worth 150. Well, inside of Ensign Peak, a lot of Ensign Peak is in stocks and bonds, just in stocks and bonds, both the New York Stock Exchange and in international stocks. And in bonds, it's a very diverse portfolio. But in any good portfolio of investment, you're also going to have investment real estate properties of the $1 billion in real estate that's in Ensign Peak.
Wow, that's a lot of real estate.
That's a lot of real estate. It's crazy.
16 billion.
Right. So that's total.
Wow.
That's everything in this report is wow. It's over $100 billion of church-owned real estate. $105 billion in church-owned real estate, which represents about 40% of the church's total net worth is in real estate.
Yeah.
So on to our next slide. Slide number 5. This is ecclesiastical buildings and sites. Those are temples, chapels, the Temple Square, and other historical sites like the church owns the Hill Cumorah. The church owns in Nauvoo. They own a lot of sites there. They own sites in Kirtland, Adamon-Diamond in Missouri. All of that is worth about $62 billion. And according to the slide, Al, how many wards and branches are there worldwide?
Let's see. Wards and branches, it's in 31.3 thousand wards and branches worldwide.
Right. So if you think, remember that every ward does not have its own building, right? So that's not all individual buildings, they share.
Yeah.
So let's assume this, again, they take everything into consideration in this report. Let us assume that each ward has about 2 wards per building, and that each of those buildings is about a 13 or 14,000 square foot building. And let's also assume that these wards and chapels, they're pretty cheap to make, aren't they, Al? I mean, this is not exactly luxurious accommodations, right?
Well, I understand they're mostly billed with the volunteer work of the local clerk or the local lay membership.
Well, I mean, they were, but now it's contracted out.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so they used to be built, the members used to raise the funds for their own chapels, but now it's all central because they have this all contracted. That's why it's only $200 per square foot. And they said that the land that it's on is about $650,000 for the land and the building. I mean, they take everything into consideration.
But yeah, because each of these buildings is sitting on probably about 3 acres of land.
Exactly. So that's going to be, say, around $650,000.
Yeah.
There's 169 temples with 40 of them in construction. Each of the average, we talked about this before, Al, but they're saying that the average for a temple is 63,000 square feet. We were pretty close, weren't we?
Yeah, we were.
We were. Here's where, remember, we agreed to disagree. You thought that a temple would be less than $500 per square foot, which is the commercial average of real estate in the United States. I thought it was a little more. Well, they are agreeing with me that they think that the average cost of a temple is about $1,100 per square foot.
Boy, did they agree with you.
They did. Also say that these temples are on very spacious grounds, and they are pegging those. I mean, how many acres do you think an average temple is on? What, 20?
No, they've what, maybe 10 acres per
10
temple?
acres?
I mean, they're huge, vast swaths of property.
Right. So they're saying that with the land and just the land that surrounds that, they're saying that that's about a $4 million worth of land. And they're also talking about there's the temple, the conference center. They got it all in here. How much it would cost for everything?
Yeah.
Ecclesiastical buildings and sites, a low estimate would be $12 billion. And a high estimate would be $78 billion, but they're pegging it at $62 billion. And the rationale for how much all of this costs, I mean, you can go up or down and say it's more conservative or aggressive, but you really can't argue with the boundaries that they've set.
No, it's like I said, these guys are really as accurate as they can be.
Absolutely. You wonder if they have a lot of insider information or whether they're just really, really smart. I mean, we pieced some of this together out, but compared to them, we are, I guess we are dodos compared to them, as Elder Holland would say.
Yeah, I cut that one.
Yeah. Now, slide 6, it talks about how much is BYU campuses worth. So BYU, there's 4 BYU campuses.
Yeah.
They talked about, the Provo is a 10 million acre campus. Square foot, excuse me. Idaho is 7 million square feet. Hawaii is 2 million square feet. And LDS Business College is 150,000 square feet. And again, they're just using the assumption of the commercial real estate average of $500 per square feet. And they're also talking about, how many acres it's on and the value per acre. Well, which is the most expensive per acre? Is it Provo, Idaho, Hawaii, or Salt Lake City?
Let's see. Between Salt Lake City, I'm going to go with Hawaii.
Definitely. So they're saying that the acreage in Hawaii is very expensive. An acre in Hawaii is very much more expensive. That's why they're pegging all of the BYU and related campuses with $10 billion. So our next one is the known farms and ranches. So there's a lot of farms and ranches. They're saying that there's at least 2.5 million acres in identifiable commercial farms, ranches. Most of that is in North America, spread across almost 3,000 properties, and the church has 35 active church welfare farms. And again, they're doing a pretty reasonable average here is $2 to $4 per acre for ranch lands, and about $4. They have pretty reasonable averages for all of the welfare farms. They're pegging that the big ranch in Florida is the biggest farm, the big ranch in Florida, which let's put that up at 1 million acres. I mean, it's just a lot of land.
Yeah.
And there's Washington and also Nebraska. Those are all the biggest church farms. They're saying that that's somewhere close to $10 billion.
Yeah.
Slide number 8 is the known commercial and residential properties. That's office buildings, residential buildings, parking lots, event centers. And again, they're just using the commercial real estate average of $500 per market square feet. And they've identified 11 million square feet of commercial hospitality. Those are, the church owns some of these Marriott, the church bought some of these Marriott properties, and, the church owns, the church office building, and also, they own KSL Radio. There's office buildings there, and Deseret News has office buildings, and there's the church office building itself is 1 million square feet. There's just using the commercial real estate average for all this, and it gives you about $6 billion for all that commercial real estate.
Yeah.
Now, the MTC homes, we discussed that earlier. There's 400 missions. There's 11 MTCs. That's worth about $2 billion. Slide number 10. Now, there's unknown property holdings in the EPA. That's what we know. The EPA has, about a 17% allocation for real estate investments. And they're saying, well, if 17% or so, that's probably around $16 billion in investment real estate. My goodness. So when you finally get down to it here at the end we're almost to the end, slide 11, we analyzed the known data, checked all of the professional databases, incorporates many assumptions, but we're giving a range of church real estate. The lowest that possibly could be would be 45 billion. The highest would be 126. And they're saying that the current estimate is 105 billion. In slide 12, you'll see what are the biggest investment properties. What are the big investment properties that the church owns? What are the most valuable pieces of real estate, Al, that the church owns?
Valuable pieces. I'm guessing maybe the Polynesian Cultural Center in Hawaii.
That does not make the top. Look on slide 12, Al.
No, it doesn't. Okay. Holy smokes.
You need to understand the Polynesian Cultural Center is not that big. You're talking about ranches here that are 1 million acres. That's who the Polynesian Cultural Center is competing against.
Yeah. Wow. And the top one there's the City Creek Center.
Right. City Creek Mall, the church admitted that would cost about 1.5 billion, but some of the estimates peg it all the way to 5 billion. So it's difficult to say who's right. This, the Widow's Mite report says that it's worth $2.5 billion. And then followed immediately by the Rex Ranch in Nebraska, and then a couple of the ranches in Florida. Those are giant acre plots of land. I mean, I don't know how much the Polynesian Cultural Center is on. It's probably on 100 acres. Yes.
Not even. I mean, the Polynesian Cultural Center is probably about 20 acres, I would think. It's not that big.
Yeah, you're comparing 1 million acres against 20. So.
Yeah, and I mean 1 million acres in Florida.
Right.
So I mean, we're also talking about another tropical area, but that's got a lot more surface surface area to buy, or usable surface area.
Yep. And you can see all the church's valuable holdings. So that's the basic summary of the report here. And that gives you a nice figure of what the church is really worth. There's so many figures that are just thrown out there by everyone and everything. In fact, today I was listening to a discussion from Michael Quinn, that famous BYU researcher. Back in 2018, he talked about the valuation of the church. But the thing is that he didn't have all the leaks and the documents that we have now. And his estimates, I think, are way off because he just didn't have the complete information that we have now. Searchable databases, leaks from Ensign Peak, information. If he did, it would be more accurate. So we are getting closer and closer to figuring out how much bad boy is worth.
Yeah, that's, D. Michael Quinn, I remember him talking about it. And it was like, he knew that the church was loaded. But you're right. I don't think he had any idea just how loaded the church really is.
Yeah. So I'm really fascinated by church finances. I don't know why. I really am very interested in them. So according to Ensign Peak, the operating budget for the church is $8 million a year. Okay, but if you're sitting on $250 billion a year, you can pay that $8 billion. I mean, that's not what. Yeah. That's 3%.
Yeah.
You don't need tithing at all.
Yeah.
To run. I mean, and you should be getting more. And now all of these are not appreciable assets. Obviously, mission homes, you're not generating income. Temples, you're not generating income.
No, but not until you turn around and sell them. But in the meantime, they're in the church's pocket. And I'm sure the church paid for those mission homes. Probably in the 50s. Maybe even earlier than that, when prices were in the thousands instead of in the hundreds of thousands and millions.
Maybe. I'm sure a lot of them were, but they're opening up new missions all the time. They
Of
open up.
course, so they have to acquire new
Yeah,
properties.
they got to acquire those new properties all the time. So
Yeah.
it brings you to the question, though, Al.
Yeah.
Is Russell M. Nelson the richest man alive? And the reason that I ask you that question is the church is a corporation. It's called a corporation sole.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a technical term here, but a corporation sole, and this is from a website that I read off. It's called My Law Questions. A corporation sole is a legal entity in which one person and his or her subsequent successors are granted the lawful status of a corporation. So Russell M. Nelson has been granted the lawful status of a corporation. So the vast majority of corporations' sole arrangements are related to churches and other religious institutions, allowing the easy transfer of church property between successive religious officials. So a corporation sole functions as a sole proprietorship with no legal partners, no board of directors, no stockholders. He does not answer to anyone. So he is in control, according to the Widow's Mite, of $250 billion all by himself.
And he would be the current sitting president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
That is correct.
Yeah. So it's not. Wow. That's a lot of power for one person to have.
That makes the priesthood kind of seem like a secondary power. The president of the church has every key. Well, he not only has every key, but he has every gold-plated key.
Yeah.
Now, who is the richest? Who did they say? Elon Musk or is it Jeff Bezos? Who is
those guys keep going back and forth, and
right.
It's always over in the news. And there's a third guy that's in there that I think has like a Latino name or something, but I can't remember what he's involved in. But yeah, those guys keep like flip flopping back and forth, and they're talking about 100 billion to 200 billion,
right?
But less than 200 billion.
Right.
Now, they haven't broken that yet.
That's correct. But if these figures are correct, and I just see no reason that they're not, they are paling in comparison. They don't need. You know what? I bet Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, they don't even know who Russell M. Nelson is.
Oh, I'm sure they don't. And well, they may do, but I'll tell you one thing is that Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, I'm sure that they both have a board of directors to keep them in check.
Amazon is a public company.
Yeah.
And
those Tesla. Yeah.
Tesla is a public company. Is SpaceX, I believe.
Yes, SpaceX is as well now.
PayPal and all of those companies, they answer to a board of directors.
Yeah, but Russell M. Nelson does not. He has the first presidency, so he has his two counselors. He has the quorum of the 12 apostles. But who keeps the prophet in check?
Right. So that's a good question. I want to come back to that question, Al, because I've been doing some research on that as well. So if you talk about the richest, let's put a pin in that. We're going to come back to it. Talk about the richest men in history. And let's be quite frank, they're all men.
Yeah.
When you talk about the richest men in history, I'm gonna count you down to like the top 5. Well, we have Andrew Mellon, who was he's worth like 180 or 190 billion. He had interest in oil, steel, coal, those type of things. Then you have Henry Ford, who invented the Model T. He was worth about 200 billion. Then you have the Vanderbilt, which was the New York native Vanderbilt. He made a lot of money in steamships. But that's Russell M. Nelson is still ahead of all those. Number 3 is Jeffrey Fugger, who I'm not very familiar with, but he's very unique because he was part of earned his wealth not as the head of a state, but as a businessman in Germany. Not something I was very familiar with. But number 2, we finally get to Andrew Carnegie, worth 337, and then number 1 is John Rockefeller on top with 367 billion.
Wow.
But Russell M. Nelson, if you put him into this list as someone who is controlling $250 billion plus, he's third all time richest man who's ever lived.
My goodness.
Now, you could say also, by the way, there is a dark horse out there for richest
richest
Sure.
person ever lived, and that's Vladimir Putin.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know how much Vlad is worth because he controls basically the oil reserves of an entire country.
Yeah, I mean, he owns Russia.
He
And
basically
so
owns,
it's a question of just how much vodka's Russia got, I guess.
Right. So, he could be a dark horse, but
Could be. Mm-hmm.
Russell M. Nelson, he could be top 3. So
Mm-hmm.
if you think about that, most people have heard that the LDS corporation is called a corporation sole. And all of the LDS businesses are owned under 2 different sole corporations. One is the corporation of the president, and the other one is the corporation of the presiding bishopric.
Yeah.
So the corporation sole, it's basically, it's a legal entity consisting of a single sole incorporated office occupied by a single sole man.
Wow.
It allows him to pass all of his assets, everything else, to the next person without there being a transfer over. And if you look at the churches, the church was incorporated back in 1923 by Heber J. Grant, and you can still Google and find those original incorporation documents. And sure enough, it does say that the LDS Church is a sole, is a corporation sole.
Yeah.
So you wonder, could Russell M. Nelson, these are thought experiments for me. Could Russell M. Nelson say, I'm going to sell every mission home. I'm going to sell every temple. I'm going to sell all the BYU campuses. I'm going to sell all the stocks in Ensign Peak. I'm going to sell all of the commercial real estate business, all the commercial real estate. I'm going to sell every LDS owned business. I'm going to sell every office space, every hotel. I'm going to sell everything. I'm going to liquidate it and put it into one checking account.
Mm-hmm.
Could he do that?
Could he liquidate an entire church?
Right.
Yeah. What would be there to stop him is my question, because I mean it sounds like he could.
It sure does sound like he can. I don't know who's going to question him. I don't know who's going to stop him. So if he can do that, then he really is worth that amount of money. Just because it's not all liquid at the moment does not mean that he's not worth that much. Because stocks with Elon owning Tesla, that's not liquid either. You actually have to sell those stocks to make it liquid.
Yeah, for sure.
So just because you don't have liquid assets at the moment, just because it's not in a checking account, doesn't mean that you're not worth that much.
Yeah.
So that was the thought question. Tom Nelson be fired? If he were to do something totally off the rails, like try to sell everything that the church has and put it into one checking account. And this is where I did a little bit of research on this too, and we're going to finish up on this, but there's a very rarely used council in the church that's called the Common Council of the Church. So the Common Council of the Church is a body of the church that has the power to discipline or remove the president of the church or one of his counselors in the first presidency due to misbehavior. And its existence and status are very uncertain and controversial. And the body, though, has been formally convened twice. Once in 1834 for Joseph Smith, and once in 1844 for Sidney Rigdon, because those are the only 2 times that someone in the first presidency got in trouble. Now, there's been a few apostles that have been excommunicated over the years.
Yeah,
but the first presidency can excommunicate those guys because they're ahead. They're the leaders of them.
Yeah.
What do you do if the president of the church does something wrong? Well, you had the trial of Joseph Smith, and this was in 1834. The council convened for the first time because Sylvester Smith made charges against Joseph Smith related to Zion's camp. Well, Joseph Smith came out on top of that one, and the council determined that Smith had acted, quote, in every respect in an honorable and proper manner, and all the monies and properties entrusted to his charge. And that's the only time that the president of the church has ever been tried before the Common Council.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the trial of Sidney Rigdon was in 1844, and they excommunicated him. They excommunicated him because that's what you had to have the Common Council in order to get rid of him. So the Common Council is who makes up the Common Council of the church? Well, this was spoken of by a revelation of Joseph Smith in March 28, 1835. And this is a quote. Inasmuch as the president of the high priesthood shall transgress, he shall be had in remembrance before the Common Council of the church, who shall be assisted by 12 counselors of the high priesthood, and their decision upon his head shall be an end of the controversy concerning him, and none shall be exempted from the justice and law of God, end quote. So
Wow.
essentially, the president of the church or a member of the first presidency would face this council, and it would be composed of the presiding bishopric of the church and 12 other high priests. So could Russell M. Nelson be in this position? It's theoretically possible. It's happened twice before in the church. Could it happen again? Theoretically, it could.
Wow. That's, part of me wants the oldest sitting prophet to lose his mind and have that called into question.
Well, I don't know about that. I hope that everything with Russell M. Nelson works out very well. And I hope that, that he uses his incredible church resources of $250 billion. I hope that he is using that as Jesus would have him use it.
I hope so too, but I mean, come on. I am a very debased person that I love watching the dumpster fire and the train wreck. Doesn't that somewhere in the back of your mind, Eves, somewhere in the back, in the sinister corners, doesn't you just want to see this thing catch fire and I'd like to see him go completely insane, like King George the Fourth, or
No, honestly, Al, not really. I mean, I want to see, the church has such incredible power. It just has so many resources. It has such an incredible to bless the lives of the humans on this planet, not only those who are in the church, but for those outside of the church.
Yeah.
And honestly,
sure.
what I wish for the church and for President Nelson is that they use that power for good. That's what I really want to see.
Well, and I hope that we'll have going forward a lot more articles like the first one, instead of the kind of banter that I've tried to provoke everybody's minds with at the end of this.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, I ruminated as best as we can about the Great and Spacious Building. I think we've had some incredible insights here. I don't think anybody of the other podcasters out there are covering the kind of stuff that we're covering and are giving you the analysis and insights that we're giving to you, and finding these incredible, off the wall, but incredibly powerful articles. I don't think you're getting that from any other source out there. Am I right, Al?
Well, I mean, let's face it. Who else is out there is postulating that the president of the Mormon Church is the wealthiest man or wealthiest human on wealthiest single human being alive on the planet today? I mean, you aren't going to get that from the LDS newsroom.
I would assume that you wouldn't. And that he's the third wealthiest man who's ever lived. I don't think we get that anywhere else of all time. That is correct. So I think we've done a great job. This was an incredible episode. If you made it this far, please drop us a like. Let us know as well. We would love to get to know you. And thanks so much for joining me, Al. I really appreciate your insights. And we're looking forward to meeting you again next week.
Yep, and special thanks out there to Weird Alma for letting us use his music. We certainly love his music, and you can always check out his full albums on Bandcamp if you feel so inclined. And we'll play it out with him.
When it comes to nicknames of the church, such as LDS Church, the Mormon Church, to remove the Lord's name from the Lord's church is a major victory for Satan.
Satan.
Please allow me to introduce myself. I'm a being with no moral constraints. My number one goal is to hurt the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.